Welcome, we are the new Dad Rock.
Oh no! What's going on, Steve?
Remember at the end of that camping episode?
So, you mean episode 18, the one where we talked about Last National Park and the mashups?
Yeah. Well, at the end of that, I mentioned how pretty much all of my dad's friends listen to metal.
And I said, you need new friends.
I mean, we did one metal episode like 3 months ago. We should have done it
That was enough.
Yeah, we should have done it for episode 18, though.
Why?
Well, 6 plus 6 plus 6 is 18.
No.
Anyway, so in that episode, we did a very, very broad, cursory overview of metal. And this time, we're going to get a little bit more specific. 80s thrash.
Metallica?
Yeah, well, Metallica is certainly one of the best known. And they are what's considered the big four of thrash metal. Do you know who the other three are?
You know, I've studied it. I'm not sure. But okay, I'll give it a go.
So it's four. Metallica.
Pantera.
No.
Okay, yeah, hold on. Wait, how about... I hope this is like baseball. Hangman. Megadeth.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
So weird. Anthrax?
Yes.
So I got 3 or 4.
Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax. Come on. What is the one metal band that everybody knows? Every concert you've been to, someone has yelled out this band's name.
Freebird.
No, it's the next most common thing after Freebird is Slayer!
Oh, Slayer's top 4. Wow.
Yeah, so Metallica,
Okay,
Megadeth, Anthrax, and Slayer are the big four.
Really?
Yeah. They
Like this is this like a Rolling Stone magazine thing, like, or a Wikipedia
No, this
thing?
is... I mean, there are bands that I like better than them, but when I first heard the term the big four, in my head I did the list and I was like,
Okay.
Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, and
I
Anthrax.
see.
Like everybody. The only other band that I think some people slip in there is Exodus, and I think the big part of all of these bands are they were there pretty much at the beginning. I mean, there are other heavier bands that did some of the things that all of them did first. Obviously, they were influenced by early 80s British heavy metal, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, going back to Black Sabbath, Celtic Frost. All those bands, Venom, were there before, but these guys all started almost like their own branch of metal. So Metallica were like the big stadium arena, the hooky, we can be huge band. Megadeth was the technical guys. Anthrax were the fun guys. They ended up mixing rock and rap, for better or for worse. That whole rock
from Judgment Night.
No,
Dang.
I mean years before Judgment Night, they were doing the I'm the Man EP. They did a rap song by themselves. Public Enemy they collaborated with.
Interesting.
So they did that, and then Slayer was the extreme metal band. Sepultura, and then Pantera, the one that you mentioned there, who's not part of the big four. They kind of did that groove metal where they added a little bit of funk. I would argue that that's on the lineage of Anthrax with, certainly with some Exodus thrown in. So the argument there is maybe Exodus is a lot more influential.
When you were like, we're doing a thrash metal episode, you tell me who we were like listening to, and you give me a playlist, and I listen to them, and I listen to it, and I'm like, man, I don't really like this. Reminded me of the 80s, though. To me, this is what metal was. So I agree now when you told me the historical context of everything. I was more like a glam metal guy, a groove metal guy. I mean, pop metal, like Metallica. Like, that's the only band I really liked of any of these. Like, Megadeth had a song or two I liked, but I listened to a bunch today, and I was like, damn, this is shit I hated. Like, Flotsam Jetsam.
We're going to go over a bunch of bands tonight. Half of them I barely listen to or even really enjoy. And that's the thing about metal fans. They're very territorial. It's kind of like hockey fans. Like, I love hockey, but if the Devils aren't on, I'm like, this is kind of fun. Like,
wait. But you don't think New Wave is the same way? Like, I'm a Cure fan, I'm a Depeche Mode fan, I'm a New Order fan. Like, come on. I'm an Erasure. Like, I assume everyone likes 2 or 3 bands. After that, you can't be like, that's my 15th favorite band.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Maybe the outside world looking in at a metalhead is like, oh,
sure,
you automatically like Metallica, or you automatically like motor.
But no, absolutely. That's how you generalize. That's the problem with generalizing in general.
Right.
Generalizing in general.
Yeah, so all these generals that are generalizing in general, what they might know about metal is the big four: Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, and Slayer. I actually reached out to 6 of my friends over the last week or so. We got some market research here, and we tried to come up with who was the next 4, like, after.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So I think everyone kind of agreed, whether you like them or not, and myself included, and a few of my friends are like, I don't really like Exodus, but Exodus was there at the beginning. They're very influential. Their singer formed Testament as well. Their guitarist Gary.
Whoa! Really?
Their guitarist Gary Holt joined Slayer when Jeff Hanneman got sick, and then played with them for the last 7 years.
Wow.
Kirk Hammett of Metallica was in Exodus. They have an all-time classic song, The Toxic Waltz, but Bonded by Blood was out there early, right around the same time as Metallica Kill 'Em All. So they were there at the beginning. So Exodus is definitely getting a spot in the next 4. The next couple bands were, I think, pretty much everyone agreed on, even if they didn't have them in their original list, they think made sense. So Testament, who we just mentioned, also from San Fran, the Bay Area. You know, the Bay Area is really the spot where thrash metal was
so
born.
Weird, dude. Well, I mean, dude, Primus is adjacent to this, right? Like Les Claypool is the guy that are like, what's that dude doing? Right?
Well, Les Claypool...
Isn't Jane's Addiction and, like, Guns N' Roses the same, like, years as this, or no?
Yeah, so they're actually a little bit even after this. Metallica started down in L.A., and Megadeth started in LA because Dave Mustaine was kicked out of Metallica. Everything's interlaced here. So they were the LA scene, but Cliff Burton was the bassist that kind of steered Metallica at the beginning. And he's like, I'll join your band, but you have to move up to the Bay Area. So they came up to the Bay Area. Exodus is there. They pick up Kirk Hammett after Dave Mustaine is kicked out of Metallica. They pick up Kirk Hammett from Exodus. And that's where Bay Area thrash was launched. So you have Metallica, you have Exodus, and now you have Testament, who I think easily in the next 4. The New Order, The Legacy, their first album, The New Order, their second album, Practice What You Preach, their third album, all those just rife with fantastic songs. And this period is 85 through 89 is what I'm talking about here with Testament. So they're a little bit later, and I can see why they're not, when you say the big 4, Testament isn't there because they're a little bit later. Overkill is the next band. They're an East Coast band like Anthrax. They're from New Jersey. I've always thought of them, if Iron Maiden, after their first 2 albums, kind of after Killers, they kind of continued on that same direction, and Bruce Dickinson didn't join them in the operatic vocals, and they had more of that scratchy punk kind of sound.
Oh, totally.
I think Overkill is Iron Maiden turned up a little bit faster with some New York City snarl to them. You know, thrash is a West Coast phenomenon, but these guys, Anthrax, Nuclear Assault, they represent the East Coast pretty well. Their first 5 albums from 85 to 91 are all amazing. Overkill never really broke. They never slowed down. Their singer, I believe, had a stroke, but he came back shortly thereafter. And then, they kept going. So when I'm talking to my friends, those 3 bands were part of the next 4. And then we all kind of started kicking names around, and we're like, who's the last one?
Sepultura. They're Brazilian, right?
The thing is, I think they're a little bit later. These other bands were talking about, 82, 83, 84, 85-ish. So now their first album was 86, but they didn't really hit their stride until a couple of years later, like 89, 91. It took a few albums for them to really get that stride and get their sound to be distinct. Again, they were a super influential band. Sepultura is still popular. They put out their 15th album this year.
For sure, man. Dude, you get a following? I think you can ride the wave forever. It's the getting of the following.
Yeah. I wouldn't put Sepultura in the next big 4 just because they were a little bit later. Another band that one of my friends threw out there, who happened to be a dad, was Suicidal Tendencies. And I think everybody knows the song Institutionalized, and everybody kind of knows that first, if they know the Suicidal Tendencies about anything, it's that first album, which is this very early 80s SoCal punk. And then starting on their second album, just a year later, Join the Army, they started really playing, it was a lot more metal. I would say it was half and half, but by the time they got to their third album, they were full on metal, pretty much thrash. Join the Army was the kicking off, but Trip at the Brain, You Can't Bring Me Down, these are like fast, hardcore crossover metal songs, which I would throw them pretty close to thrash. I mean, Rob Trujillo, the bassist of Suicidal Tendencies, joined Metallica after Jason Newsted left.
Wait, hold on. Like, what'd you like about these bands? Like, what made it so cool for you?
Suicidal, all my skater friends listened to them starting with the first album, and they were fun. The closer they got to metal, I was really into it. Suicidal were not ever one of my favorites, but somehow I've seen them like 6 or 7 times. Most recently, Dave Lombardo of Slayer fame, one of the best drummers of all time, forget best metal drummer, one of the best drummers of all time, has been playing with Suicidal on and off for over a decade. I've seen him take over a show, and it's just amazing. But Suicidal, they're another one that I'd throw in there, but there's something about them that isn't quite thrash to me.
Okay, well, what about the older metal bands before Slayer and Metallica?
Okay, so that's like Venom, Celtic Frost. These guys have a lot of muddy production values. It's almost like you're hearing them under a mattress. The musicality isn't that good. They're not virtuosos.
But people know them, so they must have some good versions of things.
Yeah, and they do get credit for being there first and kind of pushing the sound that way. Another band, we talked about the Les Claypool connection before, Possessed. These are a Bay Area band. Their first album, Seven Churches, comes out in '85, and it's considered the first death metal album. At the time it came out, nobody called it it was just another album that was heavier and unclean, growled vocals. But you know who the guitarist of this band was? Possessed?
Well, I do, because I'm looking at the script you wrote, and I'm totally blown away. Larry Lalonde from Primus was the guitarist of Possessed?
Yes. This is where he...
What?
Before Primus.
That's crazy,
He helped create death metal.
Wow. like, he's just fucking around.
Yeah.
Like, I assume Les is just the coolest guy to hang out with. And that's why his band stays with him, because that's why Darren hangs out with me. I just wonder if it's like... Les is just the coolest dude to hang out with. You're like, yeah, I'll play bass with you. Or guitar,
well, you know who did not think Les was a cool person to hang out with was
Metallica.
Yeah, he tried out for Metallica after Cliff Burton died.
No. They didn't say he wasn't a cool person to hang out with. He was the best person for their band.
Yeah, it just wouldn't make sense. Could you imagine Les?
Dude, why? He's a genius without them.
Yeah. So also sticking in the Bay Area, another contender I think for this last spot would be Death Angel. They were like 5 cousins. I mean, 1 or 2 of them were brothers, and I think they were cousins. And their drummer was 14 years old.
What happens to that 14-year-old? Is he like an insurance salesman or a police officer or a fisherman?
Death Angel broke up at around 90, and then they got back together, I want to say around 2012, and they've put out at least 2, if not 3 albums in the last decade.
Seriously, so, why not?
Another band... in the thrash scene that came up, and again, this is going for the last spot in the next 4. We have Exodus, we have Testament, we have Overkill. The last band, I think a good argument could be made for Metal Church. I think
Church.
Their debut's like '84, and they
Electra Metal Church.
Elektra Records signs Metallica. Metallica becomes huge, and they're like, oh. Metallica, what's next? Metal Church. Perfect. We'll sign these guys. So they signed him up. Watched The Children Pray on their second album, The Dark. Got a lot of play on MTV. And then they're a rare band who... Metal Church probably had one of the, I guess, better vocalists, meaning that he had a little bit of ability to sing. He wasn't like Rob Halford or Dio or Bruce Dickinson, but he was kind of in that direction. Overkill has that kind of screechy, high-pitched wail as well. But Metal Church survived a singer switch. David Wayne, after the second album, was like, I'm too big for this band. I'm going to go on my own, form Reverend. This guy, Mike Howe, comes in, and their next album is called Blessing in Disguise. Their second album's on MTV, Blessing in Disguise. Their third album comes out and it's even better. Badlands was a big hit off of there. Fake Healer, another great song. Other bands out there, Voivod, I guess, French-Canadian metal band. Jason Newsted, after he left Metallica, joined them. I never really got into them. Their claim to fame is they had this weird...
Wait, he went from Metallica to there?
Yeah, Jason Newsted. So Cliff Burton, was the leader of Metallica.
That's right.
He dies. Yep. They have to hire Jason Newsted. They have to hire somebody because they're going on tour. Jason Newsted fills in. They totally resent the guy. And they shit on him for better part of a decade while giving him probably millions and millions of dollars to be in the band. But finally he's like, all right, I've made enough money. I can't fucking stand these guys.
That's cool. Good for him.
I'm going to go play with this fun band. But his original band was Flotsam and Jetsam.
Really?
From Arizona. So Flotsam and Jetsam, he didn't play No Place for Disgrace. Flotsam and Jetsam would be much higher if any of their other albums were nearly half as good as No Place for Disgrace, because this album is an all-time classic. Their other stuff is pretty spotty. So Jason...
I have a couple questions quickly. Mm-hmm. Is it their first album?
It's their second album.
Is it different? Is it a different lineup than the first album?
Well, the only difference in the lineup is Jason Newsted actually wrote a bunch of the songs on No Place for Disgrace, but when they were recording it, he had already left from Metallica. They also got signed by a major label and had much better production values for that second album. But the first album's pretty solid too, but the second album is an all-time classic. Oddly includes a cover of Elton John's Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. But
cool.
I never understood. Who else is up there? Nuclear Assault, maybe. Do you know them, Nuclear Assault?
I gotta say, every time you're saying a name, I know it all. I remember the name. It all sounds the same to me at some point. Chrissy and I are listening tonight. It's horrible. It's the worst thing. This is like the worst episode. And seriously, I think I deserve an Academy Award for pretending to care. You did such a good job tonight. You delivered everything I wanted about this whole podcast, which is you explained to me something new about music that I didn't know. I didn't know all this shit was incestuous, so that's cool. But God, I want to know nothing about thrash metal. I learned enough tonight to know that thrash metal is what I thought metal was, and Metallica's great, and a bunch of you have good songs, but musically, why'd you do that to guitar and drums and bass?
So what have we learned tonight? Thrash metal is...
Nothing.
If you like thrash metal, there are plenty more bands beyond the big four.
So many.
We've narrowed it down. We're going to say Exodus, Overkill, Testament, and I'm going to stick Metal Church in there as the last one. They kind of line up.
No. But I think we should remind people the top four are again, because people even need those. So Metallica, Megadeth, Pantera.
No, Anthrax and Slayer. So
okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I would say our next four, and I mentioned the threads that run through. So
that's right.
So Metallica is huge because they kind of formed the base of a branch and more split off from there. So I would say Testament gets their spot in the next four. Exodus gets Slayer's spot in the next four. Overkill, by virtue of them being East Coast, having that little kind of fun and a little hardcore attitude, they get Anthrax's spot, and Megadeth's spot goes to Metal Church.
Do we mention Cannibal Corpse? Because it's a band I've never heard of before, but I love the name, and I wish it was that band's name.
Last thing before we go, we had always been planning on recording this thrash episode this week, and a day or two before we recorded this, Riley Gale from Power Trip passed away. And if you like any of the bands that we've been talking to you about tonight, and you like thrash, you like crossover, you like Nuclear Assault or Anthrax or Megadeth or Slayer, Power Trip is a more recent band. They only have 2 or 3 albums, depending on how you look at it. They've been around the last decade or so, and these guys were really taking the mantle of 80s thrash. Executioner's Tax is an all-time metal classic already. And, you know, they were a really up and coming band. I thought the sky was the limit for these guys. And a lot of that was due to Riley Gale, their front man, who, I mean, I saw them a couple times. I was lucky enough to see these guys. And that tells you I'm an old man living in the suburbs. I got my ass into Brooklyn to see Power Trip because I knew there was something special about these guys. I went into the pit for the first time in 20 years because Riley Gale was like, and I was like, yes! He inspired me to get in there. Anyway, it's a tragic loss, and my heart goes out to his family and friends, but also, you know, check these guys out. Power Trip, fucking awesome. We'll see you next week. Thanks for embarking on this thrash metal journey with me, and kudos to Keith for staying awake the whole time.